I'm Katie Couric in Blacksburg, Virginia, the scene today of the deadliest shooting in U.S. history. A gunman opens fire on the campus of Virginia Tech University. By the time the shooting is over, more than 30 people, including the gunman, are dead. Tonight, full coverage of the massacre at Virginia Tech.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric reporting tonight from the campus of Virginia Tech University.
And this is an expanded one-hour version of the CBS Evening News. Hello, everyone. This university may be in southwestern Virginia, but what happened here this morning has shaken the entire nation. A gunman, his motive still unknown, has killed more than 30 people, making it the deadliest shooting in U.S. history. And there was many serious questions tonight about the way campus security and school officials responded to these incidents and whether much of the carnage could have been prevented.
Today, the university was struck with a tragedy that we consider of monumental proportions.
In the aftermath, these vivid images of terror and tragedy, authorities confirmed 33 people dead, including the shooter, at least 26 people injured. The killing spree began about 7:15 a.m. when 2 people were killed at West Ambler Johnston, a co-ed dorm that houses about 900. About 9:20 a.m., 2 hours later, 31 more would die at Norris Hall, an engineering building.
I've heard that a classroom with students was shot, and basically a gunman went into the classroom, unloaded, and none of the students that were in the classroom came out alive.
Already questions are being raised about how a shooting could take place on a major college campus of 25,000 students and continue 2 hours later on another side of the campus. Was the police response sufficient? Were students and faculty notified of the threat? What is your reaction, you guys, to what happened here this morning?
Complete shock.
I spoke with 3 freshmen who were on campus today. You all are angry that there wasn't a lockdown after the initial shooting this morning.
It's not so much anger as it is confusion about who was making that decision, how it was made, and how they can justify having someone killed on campus and to ask the student body to live their daily life like nothing had happened.
Late this afternoon, authorities still had not identified the deceased gunman. He was an Asian male who police say was heavily armed.
Well, it's very difficult because we are an open society and an open campus, and we have over 26,000 people here and hundreds of buildings. And I think the best thing we can do is we ask people to report anything they saw that was suspicious, but we obviously can't have an armed guard in front of every classroom every day of the year.
Many questions remain, but 2 things are for certain. Sadly, Virginia Tech has just become an all-time mass murder site, and students here will never feel the same.
Most of us would definitely say that we feel safe here on our campus, but I mean, the unexpected does happen, I guess.
One of the witnesses to the massacre was a sophomore named Derek Odell. He was wounded in the arm by the gunman, and a short time ago, he told me his story. Derek, tell me what happened.
Well, basically, I was in Norris Hall, which is the place of the second shooting, and the gunman came into our class after he had fired maybe 10 rounds prior to that. And he came into our class, shot the person that was sitting next to me, shot our professor, then I hid under the desk, and then he proceeded to shoot everybody else in our class, practically. There were probably 15 to 20 people in our class, and he shot maybe 10 to 15 of them.
That must have been so terrifying for you.
It was truly just surreal, nothing to even describe it.
What did you hear?
At first it sounded like hammers on the wall, on like concrete blocks, just construction work, but then once he entered our class and started shooting, it ended up to be way more surreal than I think I'd ever want my life to be.
And so you stayed under your desk?
Yes, until the gunman left our classroom.
Can you tell us anything about the gunman? What he looked like, what he said, what he was doing when he came into the room?
He was male, Asian descent, and he was about 6 feet tall, wearing a black leather coat and then a maroon hat and he didn't say anything, which I found very unusual. He just started shooting people, and it's truly tragic.
What kind of weapons did he have? Did you see that?
It looked like he just had one handgun, like a 9mm handgun. He emptied maybe 8 gunshots into our classroom and then reloaded it while he was there, and emptied about another 8 gunshots.
When he left the room and you were able to get up, were there any other survivors in your classroom?
There were 2 more people who hadn't been shot that I could tell. And with their help, I had not even realized I had been shot until I gotten up and I saw the blood on my arm. But with the 2 people who hadn't been shot, with their help, we helped to barricade the door to prevent them from coming back in.
Meanwhile, your classmates...
A lot of them are dead at that point, or almost dead.
And your professor?
I didn't see him, but it appeared that he got shot in the head.
What class was this?
This was a German class, introductory German.
After you kept him from coming back into the door, what happened after that?
Well, we had barricaded the door. I used my foot. I had tennis shoes on. And then he had come back after firing shots in other classrooms. And he proceeded to shoot the door, which was wooden. So bullets were hitting the door and almost coming through the door. So at that point, we got really scared that he might come back in and shoot the rest of us. But we managed to keep him out.
So you kept barricading the door and you just held on and then he left?
Mm-hmm. And all at the same time, my arm was bleeding, so I used my belt at the time to try and stop the bleeding. And I was calling 911 with my other hand.
You seem pretty calm, but obviously this must have been terrifying and you're very shaken up.
Yeah, it was... Nothing can describe this. I mean, something that you would never imagine in life. Something like out of a dream.
This campus here in Blacksburg, Virginia, is just over 217 miles southwest of Washington, D.C. Virginia Tech was founded in 1872. The main campus includes 100 buildings spread out over 2,600 acres. There are 25,000 full-time students here, making it the largest university in the Commonwealth of Virginia. All the students here, needless to say, are still trying to absorb what happened on their campus today, waiting for the word on the condition of the wounded and, of course, mourning the friends that they have lost. Here's Thalia Shuras.
It is an appallingly large number of deaths to comprehend for young people, for anyone.
I cannot begin to convey my own personal sense of loss over this senseless and incomprehensible heinous act.
By late this afternoon, this once bustling campus was abandoned. We found this group of freshmen, all friends, struggling against the fierce winds, at the same time struggling against their worst fears. One of their friends, their dormitory residence assistant, Caitlin, is missing.
Apparently she was in, what's the name of the building? Apparently she was in Norris during the incident, so we're just praying for her and stuff. That's all we can really do.
Everybody's been trying to find her, and nobody can get in touch with her. Her family, nobody.
Brandon Resnick heard shots fired this morning.
We kind of ducked behind some cars, and the first shots we heard were kind of muffled. And then the next shots were much louder. Still didn't know how close they were, but so that was really scary. I went ahead and just ran inside.
Paul Lancaster is an employee at Virginia Tech. He got caught up in the lockdown.
It's an unimaginable tragedy to happen anywhere, and when it happens on your campus. I know people in Norris Hall. I don't know what's happened to any of them. I'm still waiting like everybody else to find out and pray that they're safe.
The waiting is now what seems worst of all. Waiting to hear if friends will be found safe. Waiting to hear the names of the victims.
Just, I don't know, just the saddest day I've ever experienced. I mean, definitely. It's just, it's
all we've been doing all day. It's just been watching the news, finding out more and more, and getting sicker and sicker, and crying and being upset. It's just horrible.
I never thought it would happen.
School officials are not encouraging parents to come to the campus, but if they do, any information available will be provided to them at the Inn at Virginia Tech. A memorial service will be held on campus tomorrow afternoon. All classes, however, are canceled tomorrow. Thalia Ashura, CBS News, Blacksburg, Virginia.
Meanwhile, our Justice Department correspondent Bob Orr has been working the phones all day long trying to get the latest from federal and local law enforcement officials. Bob, what are they telling you about this suspect?
Not very much. They tell us privately that they have identified the suspect and they will be releasing the name in the coming hours. Presumably, they're still doing some police work. They're doing search warrants at his place of living, perhaps where he worked. All they'll say, Katie, is this is not a juvenile, he's an adult, but that could mean he could be anybody. He could be a student, he could be a faculty member. They're saying, when asked, is he a student, they're saying something like that, maybe a teaching assistant.
So what about reports that he's an Asian male? And
They will confirm that.
And they will confirm that. And what about his motive, that it was some kind of relationship gone bad?
Every official we talked to today said that the first shooting, the one that happened in the dormitory, appears to be related to a domestic situation. In the news conference, they said it was not an ex-girlfriend. Now, no one's explained that contradiction, but police tell me, law enforcement authorities from the federal government tell me there was a domestic component to that. That's why, when that shooting happened, they didn't lock everything down immediately. At least that's what they're saying.
The chief of police said this happened, the first incident happened at 7:15, the latter one around 9:20, as we reported earlier on this broadcast. But they're not saying yet that these two incidents are in fact connected. Is there a reason for that?
That even puzzles federal investigators, I have to say. The assumption at the federal government level is that they are obviously connected. They can't explain what the gunman did between 7 o'clock and 9 o'clock, but I can tell you this, the crime scene is just awful at Norris Hall.
Because it's at multiple locations, correct?
One federal agent said it's one of the worst crime scenes he has ever seen. The violence and the way it's all spread out. They're going to be there for quite a long time.
Bob Orr, Bob, thank you very much for your help. Coming up next, we'll be talking with the president of Virginia Tech University, Charles Seeger. Charles Seeger is president of Virginia Tech University. President Seeger, first of all, our condolences to you and the entire university community for this terrible loss that you all are experiencing. What was your reaction when you first got word that this had happened?
Well, as you know, there were two shooting events, and the first one, we got the 911 call about 7:15, and our security people thought it was confined to that particular incident, two young people in a dorm room. We immediately locked down.
That was when a gunman came to a freshman dorm.
Right. Well, we didn't know at the time. It could have been a murder-suicide, for example. We just didn't know. So we quickly closed the dormitory and began interviewing witnesses to determine what we could. We were also looking for a murder weapon at the time. But nevertheless, it's exceedingly troubling, and then what subsequently followed is difficult to comprehend, the tragedy that has occurred today.
So the first incident was around 7:15.
Well, that's when the call came in to the 911 center.
You all notified students around 9:29 that a shooting incident had occurred, because I read the email on a student's computer during the press conference. A shooting incident occurred at the dorm earlier this morning. Police are on the scene and are investigating. The university community is urged to be cautious and asked to contact Virginia Tech Police if you observe anything suspicious. I guess the question, President Seeger, you've been asked repeatedly is, after the initial shooting, why was there not a lockdown on campus when there was a suspect at large, even though the authorities thought he had left the campus and possibly the state altogether?
One, you have to appreciate the campus is like a city. We have 26,000 students, 10,000 employees, hundreds of buildings, and we also have 9,000 students who live here, but another 14,000 in transit coming into their first classes. So we were acting based on the advice of our security people at the time, where they thought this incident had occurred. We weren't even sure there was another suspect at that point in time, and we did what we thought was appropriate at that point.
Do you have any second thoughts about the way this was handled in terms of notifying students that potentially a dangerous armed suspect was on the grounds of the campus?
Let me say, after every incident, we do a complete review of every step that was taken. At this point in time, we're focusing our energies on the families. Some of them are here right now, notifying them and working with them and helping the university community to heal itself.
I know you're going through the painful process of identifying the victims.
Yes, we are, as we speak.
And you're still doing that. Right. And family members, some have not been notified, is that right?
Some have not been. It's my understanding that 3 families have now been notified, but we have to be certain on the identification, and we also have to be sure that the crime scene is managed properly, because if there are later incidents or prosecutions, we don't want to have anything to jeopardize that.
President Charles Seeger. President Seeger, thank you so much for talking with us this evening. We appreciate it. And we'll have much more from Blacksburg, Virginia on the massacre at Virginia Tech a little bit later. But first, for the rest of the day's news, Russ Mitchell is in New York. Russ?
Good evening, Katie. The eastern seaboard was slammed by a powerful storm, a nor'easter. We'll have that story and much more in just a moment. Much of the Northeast remains waterlogged tonight thanks to a severe spring storm that refuses to go away. It is the same system that spawned weekend tornadoes down south. In the Northeast, it's brought plenty of wind, rain, and even snow. New York's governor called it a real horror show. New York City had nearly 8 inches of rain by this morning. Philadelphia more than 5 inches. While in Warren, Vermont, they picked up 17 inches of snow. As Nancy Cordes reports, you expect spring storms, but not like this.
Forget April showers. This was a deluge, the likes of which New York City hasn't seen in 125 years. A true nor'easter with nasty weather stretching from Maine to Florida.
It started raining, all of a sudden the water started coming in higher and higher and higher.
In New Jersey, almost every creek and stream and river overflowed, forcing some residents to rely on rescue crews in front loaders.
We thought we were going to die in there because the water went inside the whole apartment.
New Jersey's acting governor declared a state of emergency, as did the governor of West Virginia.
This car was flooded.
And in the New York City suburb of Bronxville, Vadan Hunsaker got a knock at his front door early this morning. It was a pair of firefighters in a boat.
Have you considered moving?
Not really.
No.
Haven't considered much of anything right now. You just try and figure out what you can save, what you can do.
Nor'easters form when a low-pressure system travels up the eastern seaboard, sucking in cold Canadian air and warm, moist air from the south. It forced schools to close, airlines to cancel hundreds of flights for the second day in a row, and tonight, nearly 600,000 homes and businesses are without power.
It's unusual, but not unheard of, to have an April nor'easter. But this year, winter is hanging on, and this is a wintertime phenomena. So this sort of wacky winter we've had.
The storm is now moving out to sea, but the spring cleaning will take months. Nancy Cordes, CBS News, Bronxville, New York.
I'm Russ Mitchell in New York. More from Katie Couric at Virginia Tech in just a moment.
Back now at Virginia Tech University, the scene today of the deadliest shooting in U.S. history. Police have not identified the shooter. Students complained they didn't learn of the first attack until the second one in the classroom was underway. University President Charles Steger said authorities mistakenly believed the gunman had fled and that the campus was secure. He called the shooting a tragedy of monumental proportions. And today, President Bush pledged the federal government will do whatever it can to help this community. While the campus was in lockdown this morning, students who were trapped in their dorm rooms turned to the internet for information. Our science and technology correspondent Daniel Seberg has that part of the story.
This was all very shocking to all of us.
During the shooting, sophomore Kevin Cupp was locked down near Norris Hall, but not without his laptop and an internet connection. I spoke to him via webcam not long afterwards.
How important was the web and email and text messaging during this crisis?
It was very important, and I actually had people crowded around my laptop just to watch the news and the updates as they unfolded.
It was a sure sign of the times. Students using the web, cell phones, and other devices as a lifeline to the outside world.
Shortly after all this happened, I got tons of calls, text messages, emails from friends and family all around the country, just wondering if I was all right.
By 12:05, Kevin also began helping update the student-run news site, which was flooded with students and families looking for answers, as many as 100,000 online visitors.
When something like this happens, I mean, the first thing you want to do is just find out as much as you can about it.
Madison Van Dyne was also in lockdown near Kevin and talked to us later by cell phone.
It was just scary not being able to know what was going on outside and just hearing all the sirens come by our window. It was just very frightening.
With nowhere to turn, their computers became an obvious choice.
we had no television in our classroom, and so the web just became our television.
It was more than 2 hours after the shooting began before the university alerted students via emails, warning them to stay where they are. The university's website, overwhelmed, wasn't always accessible. Anxious web chatter later flowed through sites like Facebook, where students posted they were okay.
I'm very glad that we had our cell phones, to have the computers in our room. And I think it would have been 100 times worse to be sitting in a classroom not knowing anything.
Technology helping cut through the chaos on a day with so much confusion. Daniel Seberg, CBS News, New York.
Some of our CBS stations will be leaving us now. For many of you, though, this special edition of the CBS Evening News will continue in a moment. Hello again, everyone. If you're just joining us, we have expanded our evening news coverage tonight to bring you the very latest on the deadliest shooting in the history of the United States. It happened right here on the campus of Virginia Tech University. A gunman killed more than 30 people and then took his own life. Wyatt Andrews tells us now how it all unfolded.
Virginia Tech's nightmare began just after dawn. A few minutes after 7 a.m. on the 4th floor of the dormitory students call West AJ, West Ambler Johnson. Students heard multiple gunshots and called police.
At about 7:15 this morning, a 911 call came to the University Police Department concerning an event in West Ambler Johnson Hall.
As police swarmed in, students in the dormitory were told to stay in their rooms, but the rest of the university continued to function, meaning that classroom buildings were still open. At that point, university officials thought the crisis had passed.
The information we had on the first incident led us to make the decision that it was an isolated event to that building.
It was 9:26 before the university declared a lockdown, asking professors holding 9 a.m. classes not to let students leave.
We were locked in there for hours while they were trying to find the apparent shooter on campus.
But as police stayed focused on West AJ, the gunman, or possibly another, had moved on cross campus to Norris Hall, an engineering building. And at roughly 9:30 a.m., 2 hours and 15 minutes from the first shots fired, the nightmare continued.
All of a sudden, I just hear these fires going off and all these gunshots, and everyone just started screaming, "Run!" and everyone ran across the drill field.
What followed had the appearance of war.
Students jumping out windows and people being shot and police trying to take care of the situation and everything.
Police now had to presume it still wasn't over, which meant clearing every building, detaining students who might be suspects, and carrying the casualties to ambulances now stationed out of harm's way. In the end, the number of dead was at least 33. Finally, it was over, except for the question of why. Wyatt Andrews, CBS News, Washington.
Today, incidentally, was not the first time Virginia Tech was under lockdown because of a man with a gun. Russ Mitchell has that part of the story.
Nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains, 160 miles from Richmond, Virginia Tech is known for its engineering program. Founded in 1872 with more than 26,000 students on a campus spread out on 2,600 acres, it is Virginia's largest university. It's been ranked by U.S. News and World Report as the 77th best university in the country.
They just told me to get out and they were pointing guns at me, so.
In August of last year, on the first day of class, an escaped inmate killed a security guard in a hospital and then a sheriff's deputy pursuing him.
We suffer his loss in the law enforcement community. Eric was a true professional.
The inmate was captured on campus, leaving a scar on the community.
We've had 2 shooting incidents in Blacksburg in the last 2 days.
It turns out the shooting was only a prelude to an even greater bloodbath. Russ Mitchell, CBS News, New York.
Daniel Carter is an expert on campus security and senior vice president of a nonprofit organization called Security on Campus. Mr. Carter, we keep hearing that this is a small city with many thousands of students. How do you think the students could have been protected better today?
Well, two key things. Better use of technology. Get text messages out to their cell phones when you've got a time-critical situation like this. That's the quickest way to reach people. Email is good, but the text messages can be better. You also need to have an abundance of caution. When you have an unknown shooter at large, you've got to make sure you have security in your campus buildings and lock down the campus as best you can.
Because the chief of police said that they thought this was an isolated incident that was really just happening in this one freshman dormitory, and that the suspect, they believed, had fled the campus and possibly even the state. Ideally, as a security expert, what should have been done?
Ideally, they should have locked down their campus. They needed to get everyone protected. The problem is they did not know for sure who was doing this. And until you do know for sure, you've got to use an abundance of caution and lock down your campus.
The academic buildings are open to anyone. They're locked late at night. The dormitories, I understand, need some kind of
key card access.
Key card access. Are we getting to the point where academic buildings need to be under greater security?
Well, the reality is, for a situation like this, you need to have security personnel, police, campus police, or local police at those buildings when you've got an unknown shooter.
We heard in Wyatt Andrews' report there was an incident on the first day of class here with someone who was outside the campus, and the whole university was put in lockdown. What was the difference between that event and what happened today?
I think tragically it's a difference between when you have someone from outside versus possibly someone from inside the community. Those crimes are often looked at differently, and the problem is they're just as much a threat. They're not necessarily going to be isolated just towards one person on that campus, and that's something that institutions need to make sure they know. They need to make sure that they warn everybody and take steps, whether it's a person in their community or not.
Do you think this event, this tragic event, will change the way security is conducted at colleges and universities throughout the country?
I think it's going to force the higher education community in this country to reevaluate a lot of things. And I know if this had been fortunately this wasn't a terrorist incident, but if it had been, I think the damage could have been a lot more severe, and we needed to take a real hard look at that. And the National Center for Campus Public Safety is convening our organization, Security on Campus, is a part of that, and I think that's going to be a great venue, and that's a federal. That's one of the things the federal government has been doing and can do to help in this case.
All right, Daniel Carter, thank you for your perspective tonight. We appreciate it. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi interrupted proceedings today to call attention to the massacre that took place at Virginia Tech. After offering continued prayers for those in mourning, the Speaker led the House in a moment of silence. Before today, the deadliest shooting in this country was the massacre in Killeen, Texas back in 1991 when a man drove his pickup truck into Luby's cafeteria and shot 23 people to death. And there have been all too many deadly shootings, especially in our schools. Here's Kelly Wallace.
This is a warning to the citizens of Austin.
Until the Virginia Tech massacre, the deadliest campus shooting was 40 years ago at the University of Texas in Austin. Charles Whitman opened fire from the top of a campus tower, killing 15 people and injuring 31 others before he was shot dead by police. He killed his mother and his wife the night before.
That was also a sharpshooter type deal rather than somebody walking in and shooting up a place. It was, I don't know, and if you ask me, that's a whole lot scarier.
2 student gunmen on a rampage at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado back in 1999 are responsible for the deadliest shooting ever at an elementary, middle, or high school. 12 students and a teacher were killed before the gunmen killed themselves. After Columbine, Red Lake High School in northern Minnesota was the scene of the next deadliest school shooting. A 16-year-old high school student killed 5 students, a teacher, and a security guard before turning the gun on himself back in March of 2005. After tragedies such as these and the latest one on Virginia Tech's campus, the first emotion is pure shock.
People just need to talk. They need a hug. They just need some help.
One of the biggest challenges is helping students comprehend how something like this could happen. Experts on trauma and resilience say communication is key.
It's important that students be informed about what are the next steps, what kinds of precautions are being put into place to keep them safe now, and what they can expect to happen over the coming days.
Over the next few weeks, experts say parents and teachers should be on the lookout for any warning signs. Anyone having trouble eating, sleeping, getting out of bed may be one of those people who needs some extra help. Kelly Wallace, CBS News, New York.
Among the things police are investigating right now is how and where this gunman got his weapons, 2 handguns. We have more on that part of the story from our chief investigative correspondent, Armin Katayan.
A well-placed law enforcement source tells CBS News the weapons used in the massacre were a 9mm semi-automatic handgun and a .22 caliber pistol. Both are readily available in gun shops across the United States and particularly accessible in the Commonwealth of Virginia, which recently earned a C- rating by the Brady Center to prevent gun violence. In part because there's no gun registration, no mandatory waiting period to purchase weapons. The only major restriction, a limit of 1 gun purchase per month.
It's very easy to get a gun in the state of Virginia. There's no ban on assault weapons. There's no ban on high-capacity clips.
It remains unclear where the shooter purchased his pistols, but CBS News discovered there was a gun show just 25 miles from Blacksburg last weekend, where 405 guns were sold. The magazine containing ammunition for the 9mm handgun can carry between 8 and 24 bullets, rapidly fired and quickly reloaded. Today, the National Rifle Association expressed its deepest condolences to all those affected by this horrible tragedy. Meanwhile, a former police chief at Virginia Tech told CBS News, in recent years the school had bucked the state legislature in hunting culture and took steps to safeguard its student population. It required all guns to be checked with campus police, collecting hundreds at a time. Ironically, the schools specifically banned the possession of firearms in dormitories and classrooms, the exact locations of today's unthinkable violence. Armin Katayan, CBS News, New York.
And don't forget, for more on the Virginia Tech story, including the very latest details and pictures, you can go to our website at cbsnews.com. When this expanded edition of the CBS Evening News continues, keeping students safe, what some colleges are doing to make their campuses more secure. As the investigation into the shooting here at Virginia Tech continues, questions are being raised about campus security, not only on this campuses, but at colleges and universities all around the country. How safe are they? Here's Kelly Kobiea.
That is supposed to be the signature sound of a college campus, shattered today by gunfire, as it has been on or near a dozen other campuses in the past year and a half.
We obviously can't have an armed guard in front of every classroom every day of the year.
Even before the shooting at Virginia Tech, administrators across the country were being forced to rethink security. And at many schools, they're starting with the students themselves. For the first time this year, the common application and admissions form used by some 300 colleges asks potential students whether they've been convicted of a crime or disciplined at school. The idea? Weed out the bad seeds before they disappear into the student body.
Crime and campus security was one reason some of our members requested that we added a discipline question. Certainly liability concerns was another reason.
Critics say screening students does little more than limit access to higher education to kids with a rocky past. But after today,
it may be harder to make the argument that you shouldn't be asking that question anymore.
Still, it does nothing to protect a wide open campus from an outside threat. At the University of North Texas, campus police are trained just like a big city force.
We have a critical incident response team on campus, which is very similar to a SWAT team.
Perhaps just as important as reaching students quickly is warning them quickly. A handful of companies like E2 Campus are now offering instant messaging services, where with a click of a mouse, a campus administrator can alert students to their PDAs or cell phones within minutes. Nearly 24 schools have signed up in the last 6 months.
As you well can imagine, anyone receiving a sensational message like this would have told everybody within earshot that this is a problem and taken the appropriate action.
The cost? About $1 per student per year. A bargain when you consider it might just buy enough time to get out of the line of fire. Kelly Kobiea, CBS News, Dallas.
Bob Orr is our Chief Justice Department correspondent. Rachel DePompa is a reporter with our CBS affiliate in Roanoke, Virginia, WDBJ. And Rachel, you have been here since early this morning. This must have been an incredibly difficult story to cover. Can you tell us what it was like for you?
It was extremely difficult, chaotic. I don't even know if that describes what it was when I came in. I got a phone call at 8:30 in the morning, showed up at the campus soon after. Gunmen, police running with machine guns down the street, students standing kind of with their cell phones trying to take pictures, not knowing what to do. Other students running from buildings. We saw wounded, bloody, coming out of buildings, something you never expect to see.
This was after the incident at Norris Hall, but there was an initial incident, as we all now know, around 7:15 this morning in one of the freshman dorms. Were you here after that incident or after the Norris Hall incident?
I got the initial call of the first incident at the one at West Ambler, the dorms, and was on my way, and on the police scanner heard the shooting at Norris and heard them calling for the ambulance.
There was another incident here the first day of class this fall. Tell us what happened then.
We had a gunman on the loose that had killed a Montgomery County Sheriff's deputy and killed a hospital security guard and was near the Virginia Tech campus. And at one point, it was going on all morning, at one point there was a sighting on the campus. It turned out not to be true, but the moment that happened, Virginia Tech shut down the campus, canceled classes, and sent students back to their dorms for the day.
Given that there was a lockdown for that incident, are you surprised that there was not the same sort of standard operating procedure taking place today?
As we're getting the details, it is a little surprising to hear, after having such an incident like that so near to everyone here. Everyone here remembers that, so we're still going through the court proceedings in that, and it's a very big deal in this community. Obviously, this has taken precedence, and it's hard to know, but you know, they say they thought he was off campus, they thought it was a domestic situation, and I've covered a lot of stories like that in local communities where that does happen, so you can see it both ways. I guess we're going to get a lot more information very soon to what exactly they knew.
And in fact, Bob has been covering the investigation. And what have authorities been able to tell you so far, Bob?
Two very distinctive crime scenes, and that's what's so interesting about this. The first crime scene, 2 people were shot. Now, officials won't go into great detail, Katie, as to what the motive was, but they say it was a domestic situation, either a boyfriend, girlfriend, or a guy that wanted her to be his girlfriend. That got out of control. 2 people were shot. They later died. And then they thought the gunman fled and left the campus. They said that's why they didn't lock things down. The other scene, though, at Norris Hall, has been described in the most horrific terms. One investigator said that he wouldn't call it execution shootings, but he said it was systematic. It was one at a time. And then, correct me if you heard this as well,
I did.
but at one point, the gunman left the classroom, Katie, and then he heard people trying to call for help and trying to jump and to run, and I think he went back into the classroom.
And I've also heard that he chained some of the doors, and that was confirmed by the chief of police, Rachel?
Yes, and they don't do that at Virginia Tech. I mean, some students need cards to get into dorms, but they don't chain the doors at night. It's an open campus, and so when we heard that here, because I come to the Tech campus all the time, I cover stories here all the time, never seen chains on doors. That was very disturbing.
Meanwhile, what do you think the impact of this, Rachel, will be on this community of Virginia Tech students and, of course, of Blacksburg itself?
We've just gone through so much with the shootings we had with the police officers this summer. I can't even imagine right now. There's 32 people, and then the gunman, 32 families in this community. This university goes so far into the area. This university, people work here, and this is one of the biggest employers in this area.
And of course, there are students here from all over the country as well, all over the world, in fact, because there's a big right. You only can think about them as they're hearing some terrible news about their children that they thought were safe in college.
It's not going to be normal here, Katie, for a long time. I mean, the investigation will take days, and beyond that, you know, it's going to take months.
Bob Orr, Rachel DePompa, thank you both so much. And I'll be back much more from Virginia Tech University after these messages. Before we leave you tonight, we want to give you an update on the massacre that took place today at Virginia Tech University. Investigators are still trying to identify the gunman who shot at least 32 people to death before killing himself. 26 others were treated for wounds and other injuries. Virginia Tech President Charles Steger said people from all around the world have called to express their shock and sorrow over what took place. Meanwhile, tomorrow, students, faculty, and families will gather on the campus for a memorial service. This is a college that has been completely shattered. There will be much more about the massacre at Virginia Tech first thing tomorrow on the early show, and then, of course, tomorrow night on the CBS Evening News. And there will be a special Tuesday night edition focusing on this story, a Tuesday night edition of 48 Hours. For this expanded edition of the CBS Evening News, I'm Katie Couric reporting tonight from Blacksburg, Virginia. I'll be back here tomorrow night. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Good night.